Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about the ongoing climate change hysteria that's been really ramping up in this past week. First, there was the arrival of a 16-year-old activist from Sweden who came by boat to preach here in America, saying the world is going to end if we don't adhere to her radical Green New Deal-based ideology. She conveniently skipped visiting China, the world's worst polluter. How nice of her. And this sparked a series of climate change-related events across the globe, like the so-called protests from last week where the left bribed school students with a day off of school if they agreed to attend their liberal-run climate change protests that ironically caused more damage to the environment than they saved. Those guys left a lot of litter in the streets those days. And now, recently, I've come across a series of video examples that we should look at today to see just how bad and extreme this fear-mongering has become. First, we got a clip of a Democratic presidential hopeful named Kamala Harris, who struggles to console a younger teenage person who is quite frankly freaking out about climate change, and she's almost crying. Check this video out.
I was scared every day.
So here's the thing. You're right to feel that way, but you also have to remember that we're all in this together, okay? And you always have to remember that you're not alone. Do you hear me?
Sounds like another totally sane, totally rational individual in this totally serious and objective environmental movement. Hashtag sarcasm. And isn't it funny how their side pretends this is all based on science and facts and wisdom, when really, clearly, they're all losing their shit and acting overly emotional and irrational. I also think Kamala Harris is showing her true colors here because rather than comforting this kid with the truth and telling them not to be scared because the world is indeed not going to end, at the very least it's not going to end anytime soon, but instead, Kamala toes the line here and keeps up this false fear-mongering, watch out for the impending apocalypse narrative, which even liberals themselves don't actually believe, which is shown through their actions. For example, we've gone over repeatedly recently a number of top liberal climate change pushers who have also made major purchases that completely contradict their rhetoric. Al Gore, Barack Hussein Obama, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have all had them or their families purchase homes that are either on the beachfront directly or pretty damn close to it. And this is despite their speeches and policies saying that those places will be underwater in a few short years. And back to Kamala Harris here, and she's a California native and longtime politician there. But despite her pushing similar climate change talking points, she has yet to move or evacuate herself or any of her constituents from the very many and various parts along California's long and potentially dangerous shoreline. Well, it's only potentially dangerous if you actually buy into this bullshit that the left's spewing. They say water will rise and start to submerge coastal cities in a few years, but if they really believe that, wouldn't they already be starting to evacuate people now? Going to take a lot of time and money to do this, so if those claims really are true, they probably would have already started to relocate people and start moving civilization away from the coast, at least a few miles inland to be safe. But probably more realistically, they'd be settling on top of mountains by now. But none of this is happening at all, because left-wingers don't really want to act and carry out the plans that would prevent them from going underwater because of global warming. And that's because they don't really believe it's as big an issue as they lead on.
I just don't want to die.
No, baby, you're not gonna die. You're not. You're not. And we're gonna be smart, and we're gonna fight. We are gonna win, and we're gonna take on the people who are just failing to have courage. Okay?
We're going to take on the people who are failing to have courage? What does that even mean, lady? Scaring kids and teens and underdeveloped adults to vote for you by demonizing climate change and overhyping its impact and speeding up its timeline is not very courageous at all. Towing the company line with liberals and regurgitating all their talking points to a T isn't very brave either, Kamala. So let's not pretend you're some kind of hero for trying to win the election by scaring people into voting for you. Really, that makes you a sort of bully and a propagandist and a dishonest candidate who can't win on her own merit or with your own personality or realistic, actually conceivable political plans. So with that said, I actually pity these kids who are falling for these lies in many ways. But the older and more ignorant and more obnoxious you get, the harder it is to sympathize with you. Sure, these people have been brainwashed by overbearing and all-controlling liberal regimes that have strong footholds in schools, education, government, big tech, online, in the mainstream media, and also over major metropolitan areas, but at the same time, the older older these teens and young adults get, the more and more at fault they are themselves. You got to grow out of this at some point. So once you get past, say, 22 or 25 and you haven't woken up to your democratic hypocrisies, well, the more you get past that, the more your own fault this all is. Our next example is a rather similar one too. Next, we've got another teenager / young person, and they're asking for another Democratic presidential candidate to help them and be their parent or father-like figure. This time, it's a USC student saying some pretty incoherent SJW-filled and liberal buzzword-laden questions. Granted, at least she's not crying and literally shaking like the last girl, but she does seem almost as unhinged and frightened and brainwashed too. Go ahead and take a look for yourself.
I am a doctoral candidate at USC. I study empathy as communication.
Wow.
My pronouns are she, her, hers. And yesterday we talked a lot about individual responsibility to change behavior like veganism, water waste, and plastic straw bans.
Okay, slow down, lady. As if this bright-colored hair and pronoun introduction wasn't cringy enough, now you're going to push veganism and plastic straws onto a country who doesn't want or need it? Sure, this might maybe help the environment if you could get over 330 million people here to do it, but also, making us all vegan and meatless will inevitably make us weak, irritable, and bitter people like you, which would certainly be a detriment to this country, our security, and our well-being. I seriously think this is the kind of brainwashing and social engineering that a foreign power would use to weaken our country before an invasion or takeover or something. First you take away our meat, and then you take away our cars, airplanes, and even weapons. And now you've got a bunch of weak, underdeveloped, low IQ soy boys with no protein in their diets to build muscles. And we're supposed to protect ourselves with our now weakened hands, which aren't allowed to hold weapons anymore because they were confiscated? Because the Democrats want to take all those too, just like our meats. And also, it's really hard to believe that one generation ago, students at USC and across the country, they were volunteering for the draft so they could go fight actual fascists and totalitarian leaders who wish to control our speech, trample our rights, and nationalize our industry and control our diets, just like what's being presented now. In current year, now, USC students are literally asking our presidential candidates to control us and become fascist leaders and to take over America and our people willingly. And it's such a sick sight to see.
All of which initiatives disproportionately affect disabled people and poor people. Besides a carbon tax and these individual responsibilities, how can we shift the responsibility to incentivize corporations and high-waste industries to change their behavior around climate change?
God, I can't get over this look on Cory Booker's face here. What a priceless and very telling reaction. He just heard this social justice warrior and indoctrinated college student from California spout off almost every liberal talking point and buzzword, all jumbled into one big, almost incoherent word salad sandwich. And that's caused Booker to react with horror, looking scared and shocked and confused, and probably thinking deep down inside, man, this shit really has gone too far, huh? But he can't say that out loud, I guess. Next, again, it's really sad to see how far the once mighty University of Southern California College has fallen. And it's not just the difference between this generation and the last one, which we just discussed earlier, but also, in just the last decade, things have turned into an SJW nightmare there. I remember back in my day when I was in high school and college, I would still consider USC a legitimate school and a place that was historic and legendary and known world-round for its film school, amongst other legit learning programs. But now we've got long-time, full-time students like this chick in the video who is getting a PhD in empathy or some other bullshit. And also, she's not only a forever student, she's a forever child who refuses to grow up and become an adult who can handle her own life and future and deal with her own personal problems on her own. That's why she has to turn to the university to get all her talking points. And she turns to the government and this candidate, Cory Booker, to help put her life together. This chick clearly wants the government to be big overlords and some sort of big brother, daddy figure, helping to handle every aspect of her life, including what she eats, how she eats, and where she can go and what she can travel by. Next, we got another woke college student asking more strange and disturbing questions of Cory Booker. Take a look at this one.
I'm 19 years old, and like so many people my age, I feel really visceral anxiety about climate change every day. And today, as we speak, millions of young people all around the world are taking to the streets and going on strike to demand climate action because we feel this incredible urgency.
So we got a 19-year-old college student with visceral anxiety about climate change. What a current year predicament we have here. And what a way to live your life. When I was 19 and I was in college too, all I worried about was getting laid and getting high. Oh, and don't forget, we had climate change activists spouting end-of-the-world predictions to us back then too, around 2006. But back then, kids weren't taking it this seriously because frankly, they shouldn't. Kids and teenagers and students and young adults, they shouldn't be worried about supposed apocalypses and the world-ending scenarios that are being presented. Frankly, the parents and teachers who brought this up and are pushing it onto our youth now, they should be charged with child abuse or endangerment. When did things get so extreme anyway? And when did it become okay to not only fearmonger our children into believing your BS so they can vote for your party eventually, but also now the liberals think it's okay to trot out these troubled teens on the front lines of their arguments and use them as these uncriticizable shields, which they will attack you for if you dare to question them at all. You can't say anything bad about these young people the left is using as climate change spokespeople, even if they're doing and saying something that's obviously wrong. But on the other side, liberals will happily attack and call for violence against our kids and teenagers if they're conservative leaning, like what they did with the Covington Catholic kids who did nothing more than show up to an event wearing red MAGA hats. Or what about that hilarious mini AOC girl from Twitter who made joke parodies about the real Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? She was bullied off the internet by the same kinds of people who say you're a bigot and an evil monster if you dare to question anything Greta Thunberg says. What a hypocritical mess. And also, it's worth noting these comparisons aren't even fair here because the teens and children from our side who get attacked, they aren't even getting seriously political or very outspoken. The Covington kids aren't the ones giving speeches at the United Nations. They were just standing still at a rally and then they were never heard from again. Or what about Barron Trump, the president's kid, for example? The left-wing mainstream media loves to come after Barron even though he's not outspoken or political at all. But then on their side, they've got 16-year-olds from other countries telling us how to run our nation in the United States. And they're telling us what transportation to use and what we could eat and when and where and everything. But for some reason, call it double standards, well, you can never criticize a liberal, especially if they're young, a minority, or have some other so-called handicap, which actually in the left-wingers world, these handicaps give them an advantage, according to their SJW politics.
We need a Green New Deal and we need it as soon as possible. So my question is, how do you plan as president to deal with opposition from Republicans and from conservative Democrats? And would you consider supporting filibuster reform as a way to make the Green New Deal a reality?
Again with the Green New Deal pushing, a bullshit legislation plan that got literally 0 votes in the Senate months ago. Earth to liberals, the Green New Deal is a bullshit plan that will change our country from the ground up for the worse. Not to mention, it's not even a fully environmental proposal like how Democrats try and lead on. As I've said repeatedly recently, the Green New Deal is a Trojan horse, which appears to be an environmental plan from the outside, but hidden inside it are far more sinister, more nefarious, and just plain stupid social justice and socialist pushing policies. And that's a big part of the whole bait and switch aspect of this scenario here. First, the Democrats stir up fear and hysteria by pushing the climate change crisis much further than it has to be. And next, they make their proposals to fix that problem which they created. And inside those plans, they sneak in the real radically left-wing big brother and socialism loving policies. The ones they actually wanted to get into action in the first place. Next, let's talk about a bit of a purity spiral going on here in this girl's question. This chick in the video attempts to call out what she calls the conservative Democrats, saying they need to get on board with her, AOC, and the Green New Deal, and other extreme liberals taking over their party. And well, those so-called conservative Democrats aren't really conservative at all. They're just what we have called regular Democrats for years now. And this girl is trying to pin the term conservative on them because they won't listen to the more radical lefties. And in their world, conservative is a naughty no-no word, according to the people who are this far left and unhinged. Really, these radical leftists are going further and further to the extreme, and they move the bar so far left and so far towards socialism that any legacy Democrats or traditional classical liberals, they seem like they're almost right-wingers from the view of the far-off, far-left, extreme parts of their party which are trying to take over. Finally, let's end this thing with one more college-aged girl breaking down over this climate change hysteria. Take a look at this nut bar in this next clip.
We are here to create! We are creating this movement every day because every day of inaction drives more action from us!
Another totally sane and well-balanced individual, surely. And if this doesn't make you realize just how elitist and out of touch the current climate change strike and climate change hysteria is becoming, well, I don't think anything will. The left is clearly drifting further and further away from reality. And I have to say, while their policy proposals and worldviews are certainly troubling and crazy and bad ideas, they're also admittedly very fun to watch too. Great lulls here and great entertainment value to say the least, and lots of content for my videos. What do you guys think? Are you buying into all this climate change hysteria? Why do you think college students are literally shaking and suffering from so much anxiety these days? And also, do you really believe liberals think these kinds of shenanigans make their side look good? In what world should we be listening to unhinged, emotionally unstable teenagers and children, especially on important issues like this? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.